Okie dokie. So, thank you everybody for joining us. I know the middle of the day webinars are a little bit controversial with kids flying around. I know some people in the group have twins and another, so kudos. Hi Cheryl. I'm really excited to introduce Dani. Some of you some of you may know Dani already. Dani is a documentary photographer. She's done lots of work in the family and life space. I'll let her explain that to you way better than I ever could because she's the pro here. And Dani's gonna help us look at what we can be doing to capture visual content, photographs during this time, even though many of us may be stuck at home. We may not be working from our offices or our usual workspaces. We may not have access to professionals or the resources that we might usually rely on. And so I'm going to hand it over to Dani to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her experience as a documentary photographer.
Thanks, Bridie. Thanks for hosting this. Hi, everyone. I wish I could see your faces. Would it stop the internet from working well if everyone had their video?
Possibly, but this is a webinar Zoom, so it shows us to prevent lots of kind of noise.
Got it. Okay. So I'm going to tell you why I started in the documentary field of photography.
Tell us first what it is, just in case there are people here who don't know anything about it.
Fair enough. So documentary photography, think of a photojournalist. I think most people can relate to what a photojournalist is, right? It's someone that goes out into the field and their primary goal is to tell a newsworthy story the way it unfolds in a very unbiased way. There's lots of controversy and philosophy around being able to be unbiased, but that's the goal, is to be unbiased, to tell a very authentic story the way that it goes. So as a family documentary photographer, or when applying this in a business context, that's essentially what it would also be doing, is trying to tell an authentic story in a very honest way by using beautiful imagery. So you would still be using light and composition and all of those tools in a photographer's toolbox to be able to tell these authentic stories, but they're not staged, they're not posed, they're not scripted. You're not telling your subjects where to stand, how to stand, what to wear. You're just photographing them in their environment. So if they're a baker, you're photographing them baking and decorating and doing whatever they do. So that's essentially what documentary photography is. I started in this field. I'd loved photography for a very long time. It was a hobby. I'm a developmental anthropologist by trade. I worked abroad. I did all kinds of really interesting things. But then I had my daughter and it kind of changed everything. And all of the imagery and stories that I had been fed, told, seen about motherhood, they didn't really prepare me for the reality that I faced. And I kind of went on a mission to change that. And so that's kind of where it started, where I just wanted to tell the story of motherhood from a very real perspective. And I guess I was lucky because during that time, this was in 2017, this genre of photography was just taking off. And I was really inspired by a lot of other family documentary artists that were doing the same thing. And so now there's a lot more of those images out there, but I wouldn't necessarily say that it's become quite mainstream. But that's my one.
I first came across you because of a video you made. That was like I think you were sitting on the bathroom floor folding laundry and just expressing, how motherhood had affected you and what your experience was like. And I think I came across that right after having my baby a year and a half ago. And I was like, whoa, that was some of the visuals were so powerful and things that you don't normally see. And some of them were so beautifully mundane that you couldn't not look. And I was like, that balance of how you contrasted like the powerful and the shocking in terms of what you don't normally see versus, you know, something that you see or you don't even think of putting in a photograph that you would put out there in real life. So that's how I discovered you, and I was like, wow, you know, it was the concept to me was incredible. So just wanted to say that, you know, that's really what captured my attention with your work.
Well, and that's the thing with documentary photography, because it's authentic and real and honest, it's often by default just super relatable for people. Which is why it applies so well to businesses, whether it's a photography business or you own a wedding shop or you're a baker. It just helps you connect to people like it connected to you. And that piece that I did, that was my highest performing piece of all time. And it got me published. And there's a magazine somewhere with a photo of my fridge and the pads that you make and you put into the freezer. Like that's the photo, but it's so real, and every mom can relate to that photo, and that's what this is all about.
Right. Amazing. So we are mostly business people in this chat. I'm sure many of us are parents as well, but you know, what I really wanted to help people understand through this webinar is, you know, how this concept of documentary photography can be applied, considering the current situation, to businesses and people's personal brands. And you know, I joked in a group yesterday when I posted about this webinar, is even I, the self-proclaimed content expert, like, I'm running out of professional pictures that I had taken a few months ago. Like, what's a girl to do? So I would love to hear what you think about that.
Yeah, so this genre actually lends itself perfectly well to businesses, because when you buy something, anything, whether it's a service or it's a product, you're subconsciously not paying attention necessarily to that product or service. You're buying the stories that are behind that product or service. And that's what marketing is all about. Marketing is all about telling stories. So the internet and Instagram and Facebook is already flooded with perfectly lit, perfectly composed, staged, beautiful photos of products and people with products. But what's missing from that type of marketing is the human behind the product. And for small businesses, especially, telling your story and communicating to your dream client, your target audience, why they should buy from you and not from someone else is going to be about you, the person. And so you can use So this is where it gets a bit tricky, because with documentary photography, for true documentary photography, there needs to be a fly on the wall taking photos of you doing your thing without any kind of intervention. When you're doing it for yourself, the line gets blurry, but that's okay. So what you can do as a business owner is to apply the principles, which are documenting your everyday, documenting or telling stories about why you started your business, telling stories about the people behind your business. Maybe you have employees, maybe it's just you. And then putting images alongside those stories to tell your target audience more about your business.
Right, because I mean, this is something I teach all the time, is, you know, every single one of us has probably 5 billion stories that to us might seem not so relevant or a bit boring, or, you know, why would people want to know that? But like, ultimately, people want that human to human connection, and they want to know that they are heard and that they are similar to you in some way, or that they have or they, you know, they have some kind of connection, whether it be through a situation or an experience. And I find that there are so many opportunities to tell these stories. You know, all of the social media platforms we have allow us to write, you know, except for TikTok. We won't talk about that here. But you can write, and you can share, and you can go into it, and you can expand at length on something seemingly so small that, you know, simply happened. There's a really good example of this. Yoni Alpert, who's a really, really fantastic Facebook ads guy. I did a live with him a few weeks ago. And a few days before that, he'd had this situation where he was on his way somewhere, and he needed to drop his kid off and get to a certain event, and then he had a flat tire, and he recorded it and he filmed it and he turned it into this whole piece of content, and it was one of his best performing pieces of content, and he got business out of it. He got something like $10,000 worth of business from that one piece of content. So someone had seen his approach and his resilience and the moral of the story that he told through that experience. And, you know, that's like the most perfect example you could get of, you know, documenting something that seems so mundane or so irrelevant or whatever, and using that to demonstrate a story or your authority or your ability to deal with crappy situations when they come up, whatever it might be. But what I find is difficult is, like you say, when you are the subject of the photograph and you don't have a professional documentary photographer to come and take pictures of you, you know, how can you be actually getting those visuals, and what kind of visuals could you try to get to go along with many of these stories that you might already have in your mind? Oh, I could tell that story, but what do I post with it? So I'd love to hear from you if you have any like tips on specifically how people could go about kind of creating this documentary style content, even if they're alone at home.
Yes. Okay. This is the gold, isn't it? It's the how do I actually put this? Sounds great, but how do I actually do it?
Right.
Right. Okay. I have notes. Hold on. I forget things. Okay. So my first suggestion or challenge is this. I assert that you can build a month's worth of awesome content by documenting a single day in the life of your business. So this is from the moment you wake up, you get your smartphone, your digital camera, whatever you're using, smartphone, totally fine. And you just start documenting what your day is like. And don't overthink it. Always think about composition and light. Think about, like, try to make the photos look good, but don't overthink what you're taking photos of, because you can pull stories out of them later. So I'm just going to pull an example. Let's say you are you own a cupcake business, and in the morning you wake up and you get up really early before your kids so you can, you know, deal with all of your orders that come in the night before. And on your phone you have a bunch of notifications about all of the different orders that you've gotten the night before, the day before, and it also says that it's 4:59 a.m. Take your phone, take your cup of coffee, put it on a table where there's some really beautiful morning light shining in, and take a photo of that. That's a perfect story. You can tell your clients about how you have to wake up 3 hours before your toddler and your partner just to like fulfill all these orders. And when you get up in the morning and you have these notifications, how excited it makes you and it lights you on fire. And that's why you do what you do. And you can pull so much out of something so simple that when you see that photo, you're not thinking automatically, oh, this would make a great post. So if you document a day in the life and just take pictures of every scene, so waking up, having your breakfast, on your way to work if you leave, or your office setup, your lunch, your kid coming to interrupt you because you're working from home. Another space I really love to make photos in this kind of for something like this would be interaction with clients. You always have to ask their permission. You always have to get their permission to use their image for promotion. But let's say you're going to drop off said cupcakes to your client, and your client's waiting outside their house for their cupcakes and they can't wait. Take a photo of that and tell that story, and tell that story about how you met that client. Maybe it's not their first time working with you, so on and so forth. So throughout the day, you'll start to see how all of these mundane moments actually have really super rich stories in them.
That's amazing. Like, you know, I would never think, I mean, sometimes I wake up to, I mean, even just now in the last few minutes, you know, my is blowing up. Like, and I would never think, oh, no, there's a story here, but there is a story here. You know, sometimes it's like some kind of client emergency, or, you know, it could be a number of things. But what struck me about what you're saying is we're kind of actually, some of us are more comfortable with this than others. Like some people who really jumped onto things like Instagram stories or Facebook stories, you know, that really became a place where people started to kind of capture, you know, random things. You know, stories are not about having the most polished professional picture that would go on your Instagram feed. Stories are about, you know, getting something in the moment, or just telling something about your day, or a random thought that you had, or you know, people just quickly go on camera. I do it all the time and go, hey, oh, you know, I'm thinking about this, and what are you thinking, you know? So it's kind of something that we are familiar with, but we don't necessarily think of it in this way of you know, setting out a day where we're gonna actively try to document everything, however big or small, you know, to kind of pull out the stories from later. So I find that I'm gonna set myself a challenge. I'm gonna do that like one day this week, and I'll let you all know how that goes.
Yeah, and when you're doing it, focus in on the details, because details often tell the best stories.
Mm.
And another really just super practical tip that I actually got from another photographer, which has changed my selfie game and will help you get in your own photos, because people want to see you. On your smartphone, there is a timer function. Set the timer function. So then when you're taking the photo, you can press the button and then put the camera where you want it. Because if you try to press the button while you're also posing for the photo and your arm moves and it's blurry, and set the timer on your front camera and it'll change your life.
That is a life-changing tip, and I'll tell you why. I've always been like, yeah, just set a timer and prop up your phone, and then you can go and take a picture, as if it's not a selfie. But actually, like you're saying, like, you know, we all do this kind of like, I can't reach the button type thing, right? And that totally solves that. So I literally never thought of that, and I tell people to use the timer all the time. So that's, thank you. Mind blowing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so Ilan,
okay.
I just had a question on this. That's exactly what I wanted to ask about, how to get yourself in the photos. So is there any anything else you could add to that, aside from like setting up a phone with a timer on it? Like, how can you make sure that you're also in what you're documenting?
Yeah, so aside from asking other people to take the photo, which is totally acceptable, if you work alone, it's harder. Set the timer and set your camera up. I have another trick. It was in my stories today. Did you see it? You laughed at it. My bag of peas. Can you guess what this is for?
Yeah, I was like, why are there peas? Okay.
If you make it the right look, it stands up perfectly, and you can take it anywhere. You can take it in your car when you're doing deliveries, and you can just prop it on your dashboard, and you can take photos of yourself.
Wow.
You don't have a fancy tripod, and it's just a bag of peas. I would put it, like, maybe when I travel with this, I put it in a little makeup bag so it doesn't explode, because that would be a disaster. But it's really handy, and that's a really easy way to get in your photos. And just to remember to do it. I think that's part of it. Like, you're just not, you're working, you're not thinking of creating content. So if you give yourself this challenge and say, today I'm going to document my day, I have a bunch of stuff going on, I'm going to see these people, I'm going to take my bag of peas with me.
It might prompt. Super helpful, because even if you have a tripod, like tripods are like this awkward like 3-prong thing that have to have a level surface, and unless you have one of those ones that kind of like clings onto stuff, I guess you could attach it to the steering wheel or something. But that's genius. Okay, timer, peas.
Yeah.
What else can you use? Lentils, peas, and rice.
Whatever. Rice would be great. Not chickpeas don't work as well. They're too big. Okay. Try them all.
Cool. Okay, amazing. So what other tips? I know you had a couple of other tips for us on how you can be kind of creating documentary style content.
Yeah, so one thing that I did for myself, and now I'm doing it for other clients, is to tell your why story. This is the piece that made you notice me. Is when you tell your why. And oftentimes telling your why to your potential or your target audience, or whoever's following you on Instagram, that's going to make you connect to them. They're following you for a reason. And the reason that you got in the business that you're in, that story, that is gold. And they, whether they know it or not, they want to know what that is. And that's going to talk to them, and that's going to help you relate to them. Telling your why, it's not something that's going to happen by sitting. Maybe it will. Maybe it will just flow. But you have to write And you have to think about what inspired you, what motivated you. Like, why are you doing this? What is it? What is it behind your cupcake business or behind your wedding dress store that makes you get up every day? What was the thing that called you to doing this thing? So for me, it was being faced with postpartum anxiety, and that helped me connect to my base audience of moms. So for this, I would write and write and write and write until you understand what your narrative is. What are the words that keep popping out? What are the sentiments that keep popping out? And then have some nice copy, and then pick a photo from your past. Do an environmental portrait of yourself. Environmental portraits are amazing. And if you're not familiar with what they are, it's essentially, it's a subgenre of documentary photography, although it is staged. And what it is, it's a photo of a person surrounded by their environment, or sometimes lack of environment, depending on the story that you're trying to tell. So let's take the baker. If you're a baker, set up your baking table with fondant and flour or whatever, and set up your peas in your phone and take a beautiful photo of yourself. And then that copy of your why you do what you do, that's really gonna speak to people, and the photo will be beautiful.
I've seen some really amazing examples of this lately. Actually completely unprompted, but one of my clients did it over the weekend, and she shared this incredible video. She just sat down and she started speaking about her why. And there was a lot of her past and her story and her childhood and things, and she even cries, and she's kind of not the person you'd expect to cry. So for a lot of people, they were like, wow, we're so invested in you already, but we didn't know that this is where all this stuff came from. We didn't know that this is why you've got to where you are. And and it was so powerful. It got a huge reaction. And I mean, I think you have to be brave, to be sharing some of that stuff. Cheryl actually asked a question a little while ago. It's kind of related to that. She says, any tips for overcoming the fear factor? Being a perfectionist can be difficult when getting something done. So I think there's a couple of different fear factors here. Is like, one, kind of having the balls to go off and do some of these things and really share not just your why, but also elements of your day and your average work day. Some of us are kind of like, it doesn't look so professional, or my desk isn't the nicest, most fancy work area, or whatever it is. So do you have any thoughts on what we could tell Cheryl about overcoming those fears of being perfectionist?
I think, yeah, everyone's probably thinking the same thing. So when you show that you are just like everyone else, that everyone has a messy desk, sometimes getting something done and out there is better than it being perfect. Life is not perfect. Life is messy. Life is unpredictable. And everyone who's experiencing life is experiencing those things, and they know it's not perfect. I think we have been conditioned to believe that all of those shiny, beautiful marketing ads by, I don't know, Honest Co. I'm trying to think of Israeli brands. It's hard for me. Pepsi, like, the big guys that are doing really beautiful, shiny, perfect ads, they are not real. They're not authentic. They do not represent what life is really like. And I think generally people are over it. I'm over it. Like we gloss over it. It's not interesting anymore. Give me something unique. Today, I saw I don't even remember what it was for now, but I think it was an article about documentary photography, and they were showing photo shoots, and there were some really beautiful photos of this model doing her model thing, makeup, blah, 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 blah. And then they showed this photo, and it stopped me in my tracks. It was a close-up of her face, and she had maybe a baby wipe or something, and she was doing this with a baby wipe, and all of the makeup was smearing down her face, and it was perfection. Like, it was just, that was so real. She had a different look on her face than she did when she was modeling. It was this human, and it was interesting. It made me stop scrolling. So if you want people to stop scrolling, you have to give them something different. And if you want to give them something different, you have to give them unique. You are unique. Your story is unique. If you give them that, you are giving them something interesting.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that, you know, social media has brought us to a place where we, you know, we're not sold on, you know, these big billboard ads or TV commercials anymore, because we've realized that whereas before we were sitting in our homes and the only real view of the outside world outside of our little bubble was, you know, was what was on TV. So the ability to believe in that was easier. You know, Santa Claus came from the Coca-Cola ads, right? You know, that was really the limitations of the knowledge we had of you know, what was going on outside. And social media now has made us all realize that no matter who you are and what your situation is, you're not alone, and nobody's life is like that, and it doesn't necessarily sell anymore. I mean, apparently it's still working for some of the big brands, but when it comes to small businesses, people buy from small businesses because they want that connection. And although in every business and every brand, people need to develop a relationship with the brand in order to want to buy from them, it's different when you're talking about big brands like Coca-Cola versus a small business. Because a small business, they really are striving to have some kind of piece of you. And, you know, and for many of us, our businesses are so personal. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times I've cried or been, you know, incredibly like worried about, you know, something that's happening in my business, because it's absolutely part of me, and that's what people want to buy, you know. And I think that's so powerful, but you can only capture that if you're going to be genuine, and if you're going to accept that, you know, you're not going to make the most shiny, maybe perfectly composed, professional picture, you know. And so Cheryl, I think maybe you could join me in this challenge of trying to document just one day. Like, you don't have to necessarily share any of the pictures if you don't want to. I will, and we can connect and share together if you want. But you know, just for yourself, just to see what beautiful and wonderful things you could capture if you just challenged yourself to taking one day to document everything you're doing. And I think taking away the pressure then of, you know, it having to be something you share, and just an experiment might help you realize that you could just capture some imagery, and it would be, you know, it'd be wonderful to use.
And you know what else, Cheryl, you could do is follow accounts that are practicing this. You like go and search hashtag documentary photography branding, and go and find other businesses that are using this type of imagery to promote themselves. I know other businesses are, and just you'll see that you're among good company. It's
Definitely always be looking at, you know, what other people are doing, your competition, or bigger companies, people who do something different but are a similar size business to you or within your local vicinity. It's always a great idea to kind of be looking around at what other people are doing and what you can get some ideas from. So you've told us, Dani, you know, you could build 1 month's worth of content by documenting one day of your life, which is, I'm going to try it and report back and let you guys know if that's possible. But I believe you. And you also told us that, you know, telling your why, your story, why you started your business, you know, to help people relate to you can be very, very powerful. Do you have one more tip for us?
Yeah, 1.5. So
Cool.
writing is such an important component of documentary photography. And I think that I touched on this a little bit before. With a documentary photo, especially ones that are focusing in on details, they can't stand alone. They need help with words. They need to be supported. The words are going to help the viewer understand what it is they're looking at. Some documentary images can be downright weird if you don't understand the context. So you have to provide that context for the person looking at the image. In order for a documentary photo to be effective, the photo it needs to catch your attention in some way. You can use black and white filters if it's appropriate. You can use beautiful light. Light is your friend when you are creating visual imagery. If If you have some beautiful light and you have a product that you're trying to sell, those two things should go together. Always pick good light over anything else for this purpose. And then tell your story with writing. And when all of those things come together, this is when you're providing really authentic content for people to help connect to you. But writing is kind of this loosey-goosey concept, I guess. If you don't have something to help direct you, if you love writing and you're great at writing, then go for it. But I have some prompts that I ask businesses when I'm about to start a project with them. So before I take out my camera, before we schedule a date for a photo shoot, we always have a call and I ask them 4 questions. And out of these questions, I'm always able to pinpoint the part of their business that's special, that's unique, that's going to help me tell their unique story. So what I thought is you could try asking yourself these questions and write out the answers and just let the words flow. You're not going to post it anywhere. Just remind yourself of who you are and why you're doing what you do. So the questions are, tell me about yourself. So just write, who are you? Where did you come from? How did you end up in Israel? Do you have kids? Do you like yoga? All of these types of things, and get really personal and be honest with yourself. How did your business get started? What's the story behind your business starting? And I pay very close attention to those unique aspects. So for me, my story, it's the postpartum anxiety. That's my unique aspect that kind of launched me into my photography career. And again, just write, let it flow. There may be some stuff sitting in the back of your mind that you've completely forgotten about. I ask about your business's mission and the role within the community. Sometimes we forget that our business plays a role in the community. What is that role? And how can you capitalize on that story and pair it with visual imagery to help you create amazing content? And then what is your absolute most favorite thing about your business? And why are you excited to come to work each day? This is the moment where I see eyes light up and they get all excited and teary-eyed. And that's usually where I'm able to really say, okay, that's it. That's the story that we're going to tell. I was working with a paint your own pottery place. And I remember I got to this part of the questionnaire and she just got so emotional. And she said, art is so healing. It's such a healing thing. And I just wanted to share that with other people because it helped me heal. And I said, of the 2 years I have been following you on Instagram, I didn't know that about you. And it's so important for people to know that. And she had forgotten about that because business and spreadsheets and to-do lists and this and that and this and that, you forget about that reason why you're doing what you're doing. And maybe these prompts will help you remember about all of the different stories that you have to tell.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting perspective because a lot of the time when business owners come to me, they're like, I don't know what to post. Creating content is such a job. It's such a thing. It's such an overwhelming activity that I just feel like I now have to do. And it really becomes like a chore in people's businesses. And actually, like, it's all, you know, I tell people it's all there within you. Like this is your story. This is your business. You know, it doesn't need to be some overwhelming task that is difficult to find things to talk about or things that are going to help people. If you go back to, you know, like you said, your why and your average day and what makes you love going to work every day and how you got started, those are actually the things that really people really want to hear and really connect to. So we kind of get distracted by like trying to do all this big fancy fluffy stuff. And oftentimes, you know, I can imagine if you sit down with these 4 questions, I'm going to leave them in the chat questions, the chat question window, and I'll also email it to everybody afterwards so that you've got them. But if you sit down with these 4 questions without the intention of creating content out of them, right? Just do it for yourself, you know, just as a therapeutic exercise and maybe to remind yourself why you're doing this, because at this point, I think we're all feeling super exhausted from this corona situation and kind of like, want to give up, too tired, don't know, lack of energy, do I keep going? Sometimes we just need to have some of these like therapeutic exercises to get back into our own why and our own story, and then, you know, step away from it. You've done the writing, you've let yourself be free and flow without any ulterior motive, and then come back to it and go, actually, you know what, there's a really nice story here, and that's going to make a post, and you know, kind of get to the business aspect of it after you've let the creativity flow. And that's something I teach as well when I talk about creating content and brainstorming for content, not just in a documentary sense, but in all kinds of content, is have a brainstorming session. You have those moments where you can just feel free to throw any ideas on the paper and really go wild with it, and not try to stick to certain things that you need to do, or goals that you need to hit, or topics you need to talk about. Just be free, and then later come back and later put it into a calendar and format and decide how and when and what, and all the business technical aspects that are kind of overwhelming. So I think these 4 questions are really, they'll definitely help me. I hope they're going to help others. I'm going to put them in the chat right now. Did it first? Yeah, it did. And like I said, I will email it as well so that everybody's got this. I will email like a full, you know, everything that Dani suggested. Okay, amazing. This has really been eye-opening. Like I'm a content creation person, and I guess I had a little bit of an ulterior motive here because you know, I wanted to learn more about the idea of, you know, they say document, don't create, you know, how to use that kind of everyday stuff and tell powerful stories with it, as opposed to, you know, trying to create other kinds of like how-to or helpful content that people kind of automatically go to when they think of content creation. So are there any more questions? We have a little bit of time to answer a couple of questions if anybody has something specific that they want to ask, or if they want to tell us a little bit about their business, you can go ahead and leave a comment in the chat. Me or Dani will be happy to answer that. I think also I'm going to drop Dani's Instagram handle, Dani Sarusi Photography. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah.
You should all go and have a little follow of Dani, if not only for her Instagram stories, because they're like part hilarious, part super real, part emotional, part helpful. Like there's just all of the amazing stuff in there, and it's always one of the first stories that I go to if I see it pop up. So so definitely go give her a follow. I know that Dani's going to be posting some more kind of like documentary photography tips and stuff for both family photography, which is what you know started out with, and like business branding stuff. Elisheva said, I can't see anything you're typing in the chat. Okay, Elisheva, I will, you'll get an email straight after this anyways. I will send everything. Cheryl says, what is the correct protocol for a clip to have a transcript? Cheryl, do you mean like subtitles, captions on videos? Let me know if that's what you mean. Yes, captions. Okay. There is no real correct protocol, right? There are no rules in this stuff. There's definitely an element of making sure that your content is accessible to all kinds of people, people who may have hearing difficulties, people who may have a language barrier, and that the text helps them. So there's that element. I always recommend putting subtitles on your videos if possible. The other element is that in this day and age, many of us are scrolling and looking at content on our phones at a time where we don't necessarily want to play out loud audio, or we don't have headphones to hand. And you don't want to miss a view just because they can't watch your video right now because they don't want to put the audio on, or maybe they're not sure it's relevant for, you know, their parents in the room to hear, or kids or work colleagues or whatever it might be. So captions are always a great idea because you're going to get more views that way, by just offering that option, and it's really easy, really cheap to get those added. So definitely recommend it. Elisheva says, I'm wondering between the two of you, you can both comment after this whole session, what is the balance between being open and honest and vulnerable and speaking to our audience? I feel like sometimes it does take thought to consider, is this relevant for my audience? And that makes me second guess just plain documenting. Okay, I'm sure Dani's gonna have something to say about this, but I just wanna say this is one of the first questions I get. How much of my real life, do I want to share on social media, especially if you're building a brand or a company that isn't necessarily you and your face? Like, my business is very much me, but in the past that wasn't always the case, and in the past I've had a team, and it's not really been about me, and I had a logo instead of a profile picture, and I didn't really want to share too much personal stuff. First of all, everyone has to decide where that line is for them. That's a personal decision as to how much you feel comfortable sharing. And the second question I suggest you ask yourself is, without limiting yourself or kind of second guessing or getting worried, because sometimes we have to be brave with the stuff we're posting, and usually that pays off, but without getting too afraid, just check in with yourself, like what business goal does this help me achieve, right? Like what is this going to do for my target audience, and what is that in return going to do for me? Is it going to make them feel like I really understand their pain? Is it going to make them feel like they know me better? Is it going to make them feel like they understand my why or my mission, as Dani said? You can probably set yourself like a framework of a few questions to ask yourself when it comes to whether or not you should share kind of a personal bit of content or a vulnerable piece of content. So I hope that helps. What does Dani think?
So I just want to read that again. Hold on. Yeah, so, okay. I think there is definitely things that you share and things that you don't share. I do a lot of documentary stuff in my own home, and I don't share 90% of what goes on. There's tons of stuff that's happening that is just not relevant for my followers. It's not relevant for my business, and I don't share it. So you really have to, if you have your business personas set up, you have to look at those personas and decide which parts of your story are relevant to them. And that's why the writing exercise is so important, because you'll be able to connect to see which one of these personal stories can I tell that's going to resonate well with my audience. And if you're simply not comfortable, then don't share. But it doesn't always have to be personal. The mundane stuff, even if let's say you own a small company and you have 15 employees, some of the things that go on behind the scenes, that stuff is interesting. Here's Daryl. Daryl delivers our water cooler once a week, and we love chatting with Daryl when he drops off the water cooler. He has 3 kids. Like, tell your little story about how whenever Daryl shows up, everyone comes to greet him because he's become part of your family and he's been delivering this water cooler for the last 10 years. Just interesting things that humanize you, your business, or your company. It doesn't always have to be super personal. It just has to be authentic. So instead of thinking personal, think authentic, think real, think honest.
Yeah, and I think Elisheva used the word vulnerable. I think for us, there's always an element of so much of what we put out, it feels like we're being vulnerable. It feels vulnerable because it's personal to us, and it's hard for us to do. And this is a new skill that maybe, we're not so used to doing. Creating content is really a skill. And actually, I think, if you could take a step back again and look at those goals, and like Dani said, really assess whether it's relevant and right for your target audience and bring something to them, is, it may not be vulnerable from their perspective. It may not be like super raw and like, whoa, she's oversharing. It might feel like you're oversharing because it's you, but if you can kind of just check your objectives real quick, you'll probably find that actually it meets your objectives and it's not as out there or as raw as you feel it is. And always, you can always ask a friend. I have a couple of people who really rely on me to be their filter, a couple of people who are pretty controversial, and sometimes I'll really pull them back because it's too much or too far. If anyone ever wants to do that with me, I'm happy to filter and check in with you. But for the most part, you're probably feeling more vulnerable than it is. Okay, the last thing we have in the chat here is from Talia. Amazing, valuable, doable tips. Thank you, Talia. So many of our thought processes we take for granted. Sometimes the word story stresses me out, but to think of it as a thought process makes it a bit more accessible. Thank you. Yeah, for me too, you know, this has been really helpful for me because, you know, I often think, well, what stories can I tell? And that creates a lot of pressure around, like, I've got to tell a story, like a big bedtime story, and it's got to be like a TED talk, you know, it's got to be amazing. But actually, you know, just like Dani said, having that time to kind of sit down and think through, like write down, be free and flow through, you know, what your why is and who you are in your business. You'll find stories within that once you've already written it. So I'm happy that's really helpful, Talia. It's certainly been helpful to me. Dani, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, one other thing that I guess you should know about, like, my own process, thinking about processes, sometimes I just take photos. Just make the photos. For me, it's therapy, it's cathartic, it's my art, it's what I love to do. And I'll just make photos. It'll be of my daughter, or usually my daughter, maybe my husband, my mom, my family. And one tip is to not, like, don't leave your photos in your camera or your smartphone. Go through them and take out your favorite ones within 24 to 48 hours after taking them. Otherwise, it's just going to become overwhelming. So I do that, and I pull stories from them, and I just go back and look at the photos, and I feel what I felt in that moment, and I try to make that connect to the mood of, maybe there's something going on in the world that it connects to, or maybe it's just a sentiment that I feel like expressing that day. I have different buckets of content that I like to produce, whether it's photo tips, letters to moms, personal stories, or client stories, and I'll just pull from that. So sometimes you just have to go out and make some photos, practice your own photography, get creative with your smartphone, with your digital camera, and then connect the stories to the photos after. You can also do it that way if you would rather make the art first.
I think that's the main takeaway for me, you know, both in writing and in taking the pictures, is, you know, to stop trying to find the picture, find the content, and just take, create, document, write, and then later see what's in there, you know, and see what, you know, you'll look back and you go, wow, that actually is a really nice picture, and you know, it immediately brings a story or, you know, something to post about to mind that will probably be super genuine and authentic because it was the thought that you first had when you went back to look at it. Really good tip about kind of filtering out pictures really quickly, because I mean, I think we all have camera rolls full of stuff that doesn't end, so that's really helpful. Cool. Okay, well, if there are no more questions, I don't think there are, everyone's gone quiet now. And we've exhausted you for 50 whole minutes, so thank you so much, Dani, for joining us and telling us a little bit about documentary photography and how we can be using that in our businesses, even if we're stuck at home with no professional equipment or photographer or whatever. Okay, it's just a thank you. You're welcome. And thank you to everybody for joining us. As I said, I really appreciate everyone taking the time out of the middle of the crazy days to listen to us waffle on about this, but I hope it's been helpful. And like I said, I will send an email with all of the bits and pieces that Dani suggested, and her Instagram handle, so you can go and give her a follow and see what she says. She has much more to say, I am sure. And that's it. Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks, Dani.
Thanks, Bridie.
Bye.
Bye.